This week, Moses Hernandez of Cisco Systems joins us again, this time for a full-featured interview that's not to be missed. Almog and Guy from Javelin Networks join us for this week's technical segment, Admin Hunting and Methods of Credential Theft for High-Privileged Accounts, continuing the ponage against Windows Active Directory because they're just not happy until every Windows admin on the planet has broken down into tears. In the news this week, are you hacked or just paranoid? FedEx suffers a malware attack. Jailbreaking is dead. IoT hacking pays. And the most outlandish, opinionated, controversial article we've ever covered on the show. All that and more on this episode of Paul Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Brought to you by the SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security certification training and research. Visit SANS.org to explore their full curriculum and latest training offerings. Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. Onapsis is the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is, in fact, episode 520. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. And I just want to announce that Jim Carrey has hacked my Facebook account. And if you haven't heard that story, remind me during our stories of the week when we talk about being paranoid and being hacked and the difference. Remind me to tell you. You ever have a dream that's so real, like you wake up in the real world and do things related to your dream to make sure that it really was a dream? That was me the other night when Jim Carrey hacked my Facebook account. So here with me. You might
as well finish the story now, Paul.
So I had a dream that Jim Carrey hacked my Facebook account. And it was so real that I woke up in the morning and I was really mad I'm still mad at Jim Carrey to this day, and it was almost a week ago. The attack came as a targeted phishing attack. That's like a targeted spear phishing attack against me from Jim Carrey. I remember that much. I'm still mad that I fell for it, which is weird because
You know him and trust him, so you got an email from him, and you clicked on the attachment.
That's right. And he like posted ridiculous messages to my Facebook account and sent messages to all my friends. All my security friends were making fun of me because Jim Carrey hacked my Facebook account. I refused to watch another Jim Carrey movie for like a while because I'm still very upset that Jim Carrey hacked my. That's how real this dream was. Yeah, so you can analyze what that really means. And so it went with our story that we're going to talk about later about the difference between being hacked and just being plain paranoid. I literally woke up and checked my phone and I was like, oh, good, it was just a dream. It was bad. Apollo Clark is here with me in studio, making cocktails, talking about all things DevOps. Security is an all-encompassing umbrella to what we were on Enterprise Security Weekly. We're going to continue that discussion shortly with Moses. Right after I introduce our next set of hosts and do an announcement, Mr. Jack Daniel is here with us. Jack, welcome.
Where what? But hello, I'm back.
You're rocking the vintage microphone. Very nice. It's very, very suiting.
Suffering bastard.
Nice.
Hey, suffering bastard.
And Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Paul. Good to see you guys. Good to see you back, Jack.
And when we go to Wild West Hacking Fest, Jeff Mann will also be presenting. I forgot to mention that. I apologize, Jeff. I forgot that you were speaking there. I should have just insinuated that, or just said that you were there, because you're doing a lot of speaking this year, and you're going to be there with us, which is going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to it. It should be a great time out there.
We're going to be in the backwoods of South Dakota at the conference. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. Very quickly, IT Pro TV's courses now include Computer Hacking Forensic Investigator, V9, Kali Linux, CompTIA, A+ 901, and Accelerated CompTIA Security Plus. Premium annual memberships include all video content as well as access to virtual labs and Q&A forums. For a limited time, get 30% off monthly memberships for the lifetime of your active subscription using the code SW30. Please visit our fine friends at itpro.tv. I would like to reintroduce our very special guest for this evening, that we get to sit down and have a fireside chat. We had some fire going before. You smoked some cocktails. I watched you smoke. We did one with pipe tobacco, which is what I'm drinking now, it's interesting.
A pipe tobacco infused Manhattan.
I don't really get the pipe tobacco. We're going to have to infuse it longer next time or something. We're working on it. Work in progress. Also working it, Moses Hernandez. Welcome to Paul Security.
Hey,
welcome
guys.
back.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
It's going good. I'm good. I'm finally moved in, kind of. New place.
Oh, yeah, you moved. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's good.
And actually, now it explains Apollo's kitchen outfit. I wasn't sure if I was dressed wrong or.
We didn't tell you this is going to be a show about how to be a bartender and stuff.
Is that what bartenders wear?
Yes,
I've been to a
absolutely.
bar that wear
if you're at a real bar, bartenders wear that kind of thing.
Aprons, like a full-on apron.
A full-on apron, yes.
It gets messy back there behind the stick.
It's like a utility belt.
Yeah.
Pretty
I've
much.
seen Tom Cruise in, what was that movie where he was a bartender?
Cocktail.
I saw that movie.
Cocktail.
Yeah, there we go. He didn't wear an apron. I'm just going to let it go.
Yeah.
He didn't wear
Don't make me do flair.
You're admitting that you've seen that movie. That's kind of a
There you
strike
go.
against you right there.
Moses, I want to start by asking you, how did you get your start in information security?
Well, I had this question asked of me a few days ago. So my wife says that when I was 13, she knew me when I was a kid. I was one of like 2 people in a high school that had a computer at home. And a buddy of mine and me, we were bored. And so we figured out what modems were. And we started getting on BBSs back in the 90s. And, I got more involved in the art scene. So like, ANSI, ASCII art, which kind of leads you to like having a board that has FRAC on it and all these magazines that I really didn't understand. And then
That's when cyber meant something completely different.
Yeah, it meant something different.
Something you do on the weekends, not for a day job.
Yeah. I have a great BBS. I ran a bulletin board for a while, and that was interesting. And then I didn't think that this was a career, right? Because growing up in Miami, immigrant family, from like the age of like 18 to 20 or maybe like 19, I really didn't think this was a career for me. So like I was just screwing around with computers. I mean, I got really into the bulletin board. So I ran my friend, the one that was in bulletin board with me, his brother worked in Boca Raton where I live now, and they were building OS 2, 2.1. So he gave me a copy of OS 2.1. I ran that for a while. Then I ran Linux for a while, like old. I'm with Larry. Old Slackware.
There you go.
AN disks. But I didn't think this was a career path. And then so I did what my dad did for a while. My first job out of high school was a machinist working on cars, right? So I did cylinder heads and bored out engines and things like that. And then I wanted to do something else. My mom's like, you really like doing computer stuff. Why don't you go do some technical courses, and maybe you can build them since you like using your hands or whatever. And I kind of sort of fell into building networks and then into security after I realized that, no, it's really a thing. And so I kind of got back into it. But it's funny, I didn't have the career path. I didn't know about it. Late 90s, there really wasn't a career path. And you tell it to kids now, and they don't understand that they're given that luxury of like cybersecurity is a career path. Like, hey, you want to go hack stuff? And so the reason that I bring it up is because a few days ago, one of my daughter's friend's parents asked if I could talk to the kid about cybersecurity because they knew that's what I did. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. This is something that, they're privileged. Kids are privileged today to be able to do this, right? Before, you either went to jail or you got hired by a 3-letter agency, or you were just right place, right time, a technology company or in the Valley or something.
Yeah, no, there's an entire program now for high school students called Cyber Patriot. So,
yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Better than bulletin boards.
So you are very involved with web application security. Is that correct, Moses?
Yeah. So I started off my career as a network engineer, right? And like most network system admin folks, they don't think that. They think that development or something other than that, back in the early 2000s, if you were a network engineer or you were a sysadmin, you didn't necessarily work with web apps, right? And then somewhere early career, I decided that this web app hacking stuff was interesting. And so I had a few years of network engineering under my belt, system administration, and I pivoted, somewhere like 2007, I kind of pivoted towards web application assessments, app testing, things like that as well. And it took me, I tell people, it took me anywhere from 5 years to where I'm at today, right? We're almost a decade to really get my hands or a handle on that entire discipline, right? So you can make the transition. And a couple of years ago, prior to me joining Cisco back in 2012, 2011, like that, I took on a job outside of security. So I actually decided that I would take a year off and I was burnt out, right? And so I took a year off and I did something that I'd never done before. I said, I'm going to be a Linux sysadmin, right? Just because it sounds fun. And I started working for this company, great company. They were building some custom databases and a web app, custom web app, all from the ground up. And I had some experience in previous jobs where we did that. And this company, they went, I guess, early DevOps, right? This is like maybe a year after like that scale talk and after people were talking about what DevOps could be, and they fully embraced it. So it was a tight team of like maybe 10 of us, 10 to 15 of us, half of us in dev side, half of us in the ops side, and really making this system work. And stayed there for about a year. Probably some of the best experience that you could have. Learned what it was like.
I bet you, Moses, because my background is somewhat similar to yours, you learned a lot about applications. Yeah. Even when you were the sysadmin, when you're surrounded by developers whose goal it is to make a web-based application, like by osmosis almost, you just get in tune with that technology.
Yeah, so what did I learn? I learned a few things. Number one is I learned how to build I learned the development process from the Agile Kanban side, right? So there was Kanbans, there was Scrums, there was Agile. I was on the sysadmin side, even though I helped write tests, right, for the test framework. I had to learn how to package software prior to Docker, right? Docker really didn't exist. So we used FPM. We packaged the software. And what was interesting was this app was Groovy. It was written in Groovy. Which was a language similar to Ruby that was acquired by VMware many years ago. And it ran on the JVM. And, if you've ever taken a class with me and you make fun of my Emacs, right? The JVM on the server side is a really good, highly efficient machine, right? I mean, it's got its warts and we break it and I get all that. But there is some beauty in the JVM. And there is a reason why a lot of mature enterprises run Java today. So
well, yeah,
I don't
Java. I won't disagree with you. That Java on the server side, it's funny. In the early 2000s, I worked at a .com startup when there was such a thing, and the app was all built. Some of it was built on client-side Java, but there was also server-side Java as well. It was the server side that really got the developers excited. So yeah, we're pretty similar in background in that respect. I was the sysadmin for that group.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and it's funny. I used to make fun of Java, right? Every time that you kind of heard me talk about Java, but until you run it on the server side in production and you do it for many lengths of time, like years, where you're like, dude, that app, we just keep running it and beating it up, and it just keeps running. You don't appreciate it, right? Just the way it is.
And the architecture, even with modern languages today, isn't all that dissimilar. I mean, we were talking about Flask, we were talking about PHP, and there's still web server, app server, database, and just code that's running on top of that. So the fundamental architecture is still the same.
Yep.
It is and it isn't, right? So I think one of the most interesting things that's happened in the last 2 years, right? If you're really into stuff like I am, go to the ThoughtWorks website and go download their technology radar and figure out what they suggest their clients adopt, right? And what's really interesting is this concept of a microservice, right? We make fun of it because, whatever, it's hilarious to talk about this stuff. But if you really consider the way that software is built, especially in a gigantic web app, it's all monolithic, right? It's one big Rails app or one big PHP app, right? And maintaining that software is a pain. Especially if you say, well, I want this particular process to be faster. I want this particular process to maybe be optimized, right? And so what ends up happening is you have this new concept of a microservice architecture, where now instead of having one gigantic app written, say, in Ruby, right? If you want to have a piece of that app written in one language and then have it call another component in that application that's written in a different language, not only is it maybe more maintainable, but it's reusable, right? So as an example, let's say that you have an XML to PDF converter, whatever, or JSON to PDF converter, and you decide to write it for all your applications, and you have to write it maybe 10 times or 20 times, depending on the number of apps you have, right? Now you can write it once, call it from in your enterprise from different apps. And when you want to maintain it, if you have like a security bug or something else, you're just fiddling with this one microservice instead of having to mess with the entire app stack. And I think that that's kind of exciting if people understand what it is exactly that people are talking about with microservices.
Yeah,
so,
it goes back to our previous conversations.
About containers and Docker.
Yeah, it definitely validates everything we were just talking about, Moses, so thank you for that. What was that website you mentioned? ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks. Gotcha.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah, awesome. They really are. Yeah, they really are.
So when did you start transitioning into the security aspect of it all?
God. So my first job as a network engineer, I was working, it's like early 2000s, right? And this hospital is where I kind of cut my teeth on engineering. So I went from this environment that was mainframe, which is what they had, into a client server environment. And they were early on the internet. They were on the internet in like the middle 90s, right? So there was no NAT, as an example. There was no concept of NAT. And they had decided that back in the 90s, they decided that they would have firewalls. And me being a junior network engineer, nobody wanted to touch these things. So the first time I saw the console, it was basically Checkpoint running on Windows NT like 351 or something weird. Yeah, it was crazy.
Oh, see, I got lucky. I pulled the Checkpoint running on Solaris card rather than Windows NT.
Well, we converted to Solaris, right? Because I had a background in Unix, so we converted to Solaris, and then after that, like a little while after that, they decided that they wanted more horsepower. So we ran
Nokia Ipso.
Yeah, that's right, Nokia.
Dude, we're like in parallel universes, dude. I had the same thing.
Did you run Real Secure, ISS Real Secure? That was the IDS we ran.
I played around with that back in the day. Yep. Yes.
Nobody really ran IDS real secure.
No. Well,
ISS.
NetRanger was a thing from that Cisco bought as well.
Jack and Jeff, no, we figured this stuff out with Multics a long time ago.
That's right.
I don't know why you young guys had to change everything.
Yeah, so thank you for watching History of Security Weekly. Now we can leave now.
Well, because then you look into IDS back then, and you're obviously looking into Snort, right?
Yeah. Well, so when we were looking at IDS, when did
Maybe
Snort really take off?
Dragon.
2001?
Maybe Dragon. Yep, I evaluated Dragon certainly.
Gauntlet?
Yeah.
I never Gauntlet. I never touched Gauntlet.
Gauntlet's a firewall.
Firewall. Yeah, it's firewall.
The next refresh cycle that we went through, though, I went from one hospital to another. The next refresh cycle, it really wasn't about IDS anymore. It was we were looking at that point at Tipping Point in 2002, and EI, which is kind of a blast from the past. So Mark Mayfrey and EI decided to come over and said, "Hey, we got some new technology to show you," and it was their Blink HIPS product, which was a really, for its time, that product was pretty stellar. I used it for a few years, and I really liked that product, actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's quite the stroll down memory lane.
Absolutely.
That's
so then
right,
where did you go after that, Moses? Because today you're very involved with the advanced web app pen testing, so I'm assuming you've done a lot of web app pen testing stuff.
Yeah, so my first real security engineering job, where I wasn't a network engineer or sysadmin, I was just a pure security engineer job, was at a startup, right? So it was all at once. It was a startup. It was wear every hat and just focus on security. And at the time, it was a company that had a web service. It was a pretty interesting company. They built their own databases. They had a web service with APIs that you could call. They had just been starting to build their web front end. And not only did I have to be the security person on the network side, which wasn't really a big network, it was pretty easy. It was like, a couple people. But then I had to start looking at their web app, which was every single language you could think of, right? The database was written in C. The web front end was written in PHP. There was some Perl code, which you never want to do that ever again. There was all this stuff going on. And they were actually a pretty big target. Because of the data that they had. We won't kind of go in there, but they were a pretty big target. And so we would see attacks on their front-end website quite often. And every time that they would release code, there would always be a struggle to figure out what new thing did they introduce? What did they break? What was wrong with their PHP stack? Things like that.
Yeah, so certainly you had your share of vulnerabilities to pull from with PHP.
Yeah, well, and it's funny. We implemented things back in 2010 that people, they really take for granted now. Like we had to build. So back in 2010, we were talking to people like Johannes and talking about, well, how do we secure a web app? And one of the things we did back then was we built a service. Wasn't a microservice, but I guess today it could be called a microservice, in which when you put in your username and password, we would send an SMS code that was randomly generated with 6 characters. And now we see people doing that now, and we're like, hey, we could have just used Google Authenticator, right? But what I learned from that was, we were doing interesting things, right? Because it was a startup. We did the 6-character code thing, which I fought tooth and nail to get in. We did the we had to do the salted database passwords back then, which people didn't do much. And then we did GeoIP lookups.
Right.
And the weirdest thing with GeoIP lookups was we had one class of a customer that we always had trouble with, and that was satellite. So anybody that's thinking of doing, so it turns out that GeoIP of satellite turns out to be unknown. So you're doing a lot of exceptions for things like DirecTV, HughesNet, etc. So
when we talk about PHP today, Moses, I think it's a great segue into modern PHP apps. I've noticed a lot, even in the past couple of years, things have gotten more resilient. We poke fun at WordPress, we poke fun at PHP, but I think things have gotten a lot better. What's your current recommendations for applications today?
Yeah, you can't really secure PHP application. No, so here's the reality of it, right? We've written a lot of code. And so that code, I mean, hell, we still have people running COBOL, right? So
I actually worked on a COBOL project one time, about 3 years ago.
Yeah, there you go. So, and you can get paid a lot actually writing COBOL.
We wrote a Python wrapper around it.
So,
Lord.
you could. So, there's a lot of software out there that's going to be existing, and especially in emerging markets, you're going to still see a lot of PHP. So even if you try to modernize it all, you're still going to see a lot of legacy PHP still out there. It's not like that software is going to go away.
Have you used PHP 7.1 yet?
Yeah, I have.
So I'm curious about your perspective, given a bit of a Java background. To me, basically PHP 5.6 and going forward feels a ton like Java. You know, you're starting to see a lot more packages, a lot more namespaces. You're starting to get a lot more type checking and type safety.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. Is that within in 7.1?
Well, so look, I mean, PHP has some architectural problems, right? So, number one, the way that PHP objects work, and the way that they do, the objects are global, right? So, the reason that PHP object injection and deserialization still is a problem is because PHP treats everything as a flat kind of namespace environment, right? So when you're running a big PHP app, if you can do something like deserialize an object, right, which is the process of you taking something that's in a binary format and maintaining its structure, right? It's a pretty common thing. If you can, and you'll see a lot of these vulnerabilities still out there, right? This is what all these PHP object serialization vulnerabilities are about, right? You can deserialize this PHP object, and you can overwrite, right? In the memory of the application, you can overwrite properties, right?
So it's almost like memory injection is for an operating system. Is that kind of like deserialization for an application?
So. All right, so I guess we got to deconstruct two things, right? One is deserialization. The other one is the way that PHP treats objects, right?
Okay.
So deserialization is just or serialization and deserialization is the concept that you take a structure, right, and you persist its integrity, right? So think of reading packets off the wire, right? So if you want to keep a PCAP in its format and not convert it into text or base 64 or some other format, you can serialize that object and then store it somewhere. Store it in a file, put it on the wire, right? So you'll see a lot of network-based services or network sockets using serialization, right? So Node.js has it, Java has it. Every language has a serialization function, right? Which is okay. The danger is when you take serialized objects in from a user without trusting it, right? With just blindly trusting it, saying, okay, well, I'm going to blindly trust whatever you're going to send me in this serialized format, and then I'm going to look at it, right, and deserialize it. So a lot of these, so what happens is you deserialize it, and in PHP, the developers of PHP decided that when you deserialize an object, there would be these methods that you could call, right? So certain methods wake up an object, certain methods destroy an object, right? So you deserialize an object, and then PHP has to destroy the contents of that object to take in the next job. Well, when you call destroy, PHP then will also call wake up, right? And when you call wake up, you can now build your own. You can now actually be in the stream of objects, okay? So if you know the structure of an application and you know where other objects are, then you can then override the properties. So that's the other thing about PHP that's weird, is that they don't have object-oriented programming, right? It's not a thing for PHP. No, it's not a thing. Really.
Yep, in PHP.
Right. So they have namespace, kind of like namespaces. They have classes and properties, and then methods. Right, so you have public methods.
Classes, methods, and properties, but not objects.
Yep. Classes, methods, and projects. Oh my.
Yeah. But the crazy thing is that you can then take this. You can take a property, and then you can overwrite whatever it's supposed to do. Right. And so that's, if you look at any of the bugs that existed in the last few years around PHP object deserialization. They're pretty basic, right? Like the Joomla one is probably the most epic one, where you basically what Joomla did is they took the user agent string because you want to do analytics, right? To show like people, hey, I've got a nice console, right? And I have like this many Android apps, this many iPhone users, whatever. They took this cookie value, they took their user agent string, all this, and they shoved it in an object, and they serialized it in a database, right? And so it's sitting there in its database as a serialized blob, right? And so what happens is when you go to call it, it's got to pull that out of the database and then show it to you on the screen. There was an issue with the way that the Joomla developers decided to persist things in the database, okay? So they wanted to take a shortcut, and they actually wrote a function that allowed you to shortcut function names inside of the application so that you could like you could actually talk faster or type faster, whatever you're trying to program in Joomla. And so because you were taking in untrusted data, right? A user agent string from your browser is not really.
It's just data. It's data from the user, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you can just take that. So what people did, what they were doing was they took that and then they injected a extension into the database driver that Joomla had created for this shortcut, and from there they were then able to look at the Joomla source code and figure out where in the Joomla source code could they then extend their attack, providing that you could, write files to the disk or whatever, what have you. And they were able to do that, right?
So they were able to call other Joomla functions from a user agent string based on the way it was essentially being parsed by the PHP engine, right? I mean, because deserialization is essentially parsing on unstructured data that you're getting from the user.
A structured data.
Structured data from the user,
Structured data, that's right. I know the PHP folks will tell you don't do this, right? They actually tell you that the way you should do this is you use JSON, and then you base64 encode and decode things, and that should be good enough.
Yeah. So what is really geeky? What is the difference between encoding and decoding in serialization and deserialization?
Technically, you can maintain structure a little better in serialized objects. So, for example, let's say that you wanted to take a PCAP, right, which is a hexadecimal binary blob, right? It would be much easier for you to serialize the PCAP and then stick it on a file system somewhere than it would be for you to take that base64 encode it, then base64 decode it, put it back in its structure, that whole thing.
I gotcha. Okay.
You got some extra steps.
Oh yeah, if you want to do this in Python, look up pickle.
Pickle.
Yeah, well,
Python
there's
pickle.
There's pickle.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't.
Yeah.
I'll look into pickling my Python after the show. Certainly. Wait.
Yeah, you should.
No, Python pickle. Python pickle.
Python pickle. So Moses, I'm sure you've seen with some of these deserialization bugs, you're seeing things like overloading function names, calling existing function names given the namespace, passing in null values, etc.
Well, I mean, you also have autoload, right? So the other thing that's crazy is that in PHP, so the new thing in PHP, I guess like in every language, is frameworks, right? So you have Cake PHP and Laravel and all these different things. And modern software, like Python people would understand this, right? Modern software is not necessarily written as much as it's assembled, right? So you take this library.
It's component-based.
You take all these libraries, you glue them together, and you're
like Legos.
I've got software. Yeah.
I knew there was no new code being written.
Pretty much. Right. Pretty much. You're correct, Jeff. Absolutely.
Absolutely not, right? So in PHP, to make this easier, they have this thing now called autoload. And so what happens is that any library that you will put in a directory could be auto-loaded by the framework. So not only do you have PHP object serialization inside of the source code, but if you find it in a library that's used a lot, and that library gets put into a directory, then it becomes part of the application dynamically. So you don't have to require any more PHP files to move those libraries in. You can just use autoload, and it automatically loads all those libraries. Because PHP is not dangerous enough. Yeah. So I mean,
do you get namespace collision on functions? Is that what you were saying, Apollo?
Yeah. So Moses knows more about this than I do. Is with PHP you can overload. You can do the same thing in JavaScript. So you have a function called foo. Well, you can redeclare that function foo with whatever your proprietary code is.
I gotcha.
Well, and that's what the object injection is, right? You're taking a public function, like let's say file writer, and let's say file writer is supposed to write a file to a particular part of the disk, right? So file writer equals ctemp, whatever. What your injection could do is overwrite that ctemp to whatever you want. You are now in control of the file writer object or property, right? So that's what object injection is.
Interesting. But now Java's also suffered from deserialization bugs as well.
Yes, but the Java one is different because, and actually more interesting, because Java actually went through the trouble of creating a security manager, right? So they built security into Java, believe it or not. So what's actually happening with
I refuse to believe that.
But hold on. Isn't the JBoss, one of the JBoss vulnerabilities, a deserialization bug in JBoss?
Yeah, there is, right? So what's happening there is instead of you taking this flat object space, what they're doing is you're deserializing it, which is great. You've got the same concept, right, that we just talked about. But in Java, you now have this concept of a class and then a superclass, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
And technically, you're not supposed to be able to call blacklisted classes, right? So like system, where you can run commands, is blacklisted, right, or should be blacklisted, so you can't necessarily call it. But if you look at a lot of the deserialization exploits, what you're doing is you're calling a class, like, I don't know, math, as an example, right? So Java lang math, and then once the math class is loaded, using something called Java reflection, you can actually go back upwards and call system again, because it's been loaded, because system inherits from, or because math inherits from.
It take me all the way back to my Java class in college. Yeah. All right, yeah.
Sorry.
My brain hurts now.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's great. It was great.
You know what the real problem is, guys? It's these damn Turing machines. We just got to get rid of these damn Turing machines.
Yeah, what is it that I've heard lately that everybody keeps saying? The future doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So what you said, you were building in some new attack techniques into it, the advanced web app pen testing. You mentioned, we talked about in-depth serialization, deserialization, which was awesome. Thank you for that. I learned a ton. What other kinds of interesting attacks?
Yeah, so a lot of the there's a lot of unearthed surface now that I think people are kind of missing the boat on, right? So, 5 years ago, right, we would talk about things like, hey, you can call a page without authentication, right? Well, frameworks took care of that. So that's really not a common or as common attack, or shouldn't be, right? We know how to deal with that. So what
except on IoT, but that's a different story.
Right, except on IoT and all
largely because frameworks aren't largely implemented on IoT. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah. And by the way, IoT has its own set of problems because the CPUs might not be able to take the computational power for loading a framework.
Yep.
So, other issue. But the other attack, so client side is a big thing, right? Now we see a lot more encryption. So one of the things that we were looking at adding that didn't make it to this build, but it's something that's on the roadmap, is using things like Firebug to debug client-side JavaScript. Because what's happening is you're dealing a lot with now things like Webpack, which takes a lot of client-side JavaScript frameworks and compresses them. So you got to deal with that, and it minifies them. So how do you deal with minification? There's also things like there's very heavily used JavaScript frameworks. There's even things now. This is a new one for me. This one kind of threw me for a loop. It's called isomorphic JavaScript. Have you heard of this one?
I have not.
Have you heard of React.js?
Yeah, React, Angular, yeah.
Well, I've heard of Angular, yes.
Specifically React, right? So,
yep.
So I went to learn React about a year ago. And so I went to Ruby on Rails GitHub example site, which is how I learn quickly, right? I kind of go through some example code and kind of grok it, right? So I went to this like React.js Ruby on Rails thing. So I ran it and I noticed that I'm running two sockets. I'm running port 3000, which is Ruby on Rails WebRick. Great, got that. And then I'm running port 5000, running Node.js. And I'm like, what the heck is this? So what the heck is React.js then, and why is it running a socket and the whole thing? So what's happening here is Facebook, and you can see how their thinking goes, right? Facebook decided that putting a bunch of JavaScript client side on a mobile phone, probably not the most efficient for battery or data, right? So
we were just talking about how much JavaScript Facebook can load when you call some of their web
2 megabytes for a like button.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So what is this React.js thing that they're pushing now? So the Rails app boots up, right? You go to call a page, Rails does its Ruby thing, right? Where it does a whole, it returns a page with JavaScript, right? CoffeeScript or whatever. And then it sends it to the Node.js server. So what the hell is the Node.js server doing? Well, what React is doing is it's rendering the DOM, right, server side, and then returning HTML to the phone, right?
So it's like a reverse proxy for JavaScript.
Yeah, and it's crazy because what attack surface is that, and who the heck is going to test it? And so there's all these bugs that I think are basically being unearthed that are new, and right now, I think that's why you're seeing the consternation in the industry around like the new OWASP guide, where people, or new OWASP top 10, where they're talking about APIs and self-defending applications or whatever. It's because there's a whole set of bug classes that in the last 3 years has kind of, I think, taken over. We just haven't caught up yet.
Now, speaking of APIs and such, they've become so popular. Managing your OAuth tokens and credentials, are there newer attacks that you found, or just, in general, I think there's abuses. We saw the whole basically social engineering attack that was based on OAuth, but I've found managing modern applications today, it's like a credential management nightmare because I've got all these OAuth tokens everywhere.
Yeah, OAuth is a beast, right? So you have people like Twitter that has maintained their OAuth 1 environment, probably because it's tested and they know how to use it. But that has its own set of challenges because OAuth 1 never expires, right? So one time in class, I know I'm a Twitter user for 9 years now, right? So one time in class, maybe a year ago, we were talking about OAuth, and I decided to show the students all the OAuth tokens that are in my Twitter account, and there was probably 500. Right? And I'm like, well, this is a little embarrassing, but I should probably clean these up. Well, which ones do I use? I don't even know. So we have that. We have then the OAuth 2 thing, where one of the craziest things that I think people haven't even realized is you set up your OAuth 1 or OAuth 2 with a web app, one of these new Silicon Valley startup web apps, and then that web app disappears, right? So now you've got an orphaned OAuth token, right? But you also potentially have maybe orphaned servers, right? So did that startup erase things correctly? Did they leave things dangling? Are my OAuth tokens in other places? And there are a bunch of these OAuth bugs that, yes, there are vulnerabilities. We just saw one. There was a great bug bounty award from Airbnb around the way that they did OAuth 2 and the way that they actually used a seldom used Airbnb site to actually gain credentials, right, or gain access, right?
That's interesting.
How
persistent are all? Isn't there the concept of refreshing the token though?
OAuth 2.
Yeah, that's OAuth 2, right? You have to refresh the token, but that obviously causes issues in your application.
You have to. You'll see in some web apps they do this correctly. You'll see it say that, hey, in about 30 days or so from now, your OAuth credentials are going to be revoked. Click here to refresh.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is great. Which that solves that problem. The issue is how many people have actually migrated to OAuth 2. And as an example, right, Twitter, which is arguably one of the bigger ones out there, they're still running OAuth 1. And
right. Because I don't ever have to refresh my Twitter OAuth credentials. Yeah.
And I would actually prefer maybe sometimes to use Twitter for some apps than Facebook, right? Because maybe Facebook is a little personal, or I don't know.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. Apollo, questions for Moses on modern?
I gotta say that again. This is my area, so I have way too many. I don't know. I just feel really uncomfortable running JavaScript on the server side. frankly.
Yeah, well, Moses presented the last time he was on the show a text segment on how the server-side JavaScript ends up on the client, and you end up running it on the client.
Yeah, so Moses, again,
we covered that last time, but
sorry, I missed that segment.
That's okay.
Step in, interrupt me, please. JavaScript is a great language because it's really quick and easy to learn, really loosely typed. It's all, was it object-oriented, right? It's not, it's prototypical. So everything's a prototype, and everything inherits from the prototype, and you can basically do whatever you want. You can overload things, override things. It makes it really flexible. Doesn't throw very many errors. It's very resilient, so it's quick and easy to learn. And that's really nice for junior developers. You can write code really quick and easy. But unfortunately, when you write things at scale, which I have, I've written apps that included like literally 500,000 lines of JavaScript.
Wow.
It was insane. I think the total was like 25 megabytes for a client side. It was an AngularJS app. So I've seen AngularJS at scale. You know, it hides a lot of errors. There were times where we'd write errors in the code, and it took us days to debug it just because of how kind of forgiving a language JavaScript was. And, you know, just because of that kind of flexibility, it's great client-side because most browsers nowadays have a pretty good sandbox around that. They say, yeah, you can do some crazy stuff, but it's pretty well self-contained. You can't go ahead and, you know, it used to be back in the day with IE 6 and everything. You could open files, you could open up network connections, etc. You know, nowadays the sandboxes in Chrome and Firefox are pretty well done. And I just think of that in terms of on the server side. There's just such a higher potential for damage, just given the flexibility and kind of openness of JavaScript as a language. What do you think of that?
No, it's all good. You don't have to worry about it. It's fine. Secure.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's a great language. I would say it's a great language in certain contexts. But client server side,
it has to be flexible in order to run in all the different browsers, right? I mean, that's I think is part of the reason why they built that flexibility.
Yeah. But server side, that's a whole other context.
It is.
It was never designed for that. So it's like you're just shoehorning this language into a context it was never made for.
Well, so first of all, like, okay, so JavaScript, where do I start?
Server side, let's talk about server side JavaScript. Good and bad.
So server side JavaScript was part of the language from the beginning. Right?
Really?
Nobody ever used it.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. It really took off after Google's V8 engine and after there was a book called JavaScript, The Good Parts, and that's where people really started to take notice of the language. And the promise was, hey, you're having to write JavaScript client side, so why don't you just do it server side? So,
interesting.
You know, Node.js runs on top of V8, and anyway, so the thing about the language, right? There's
I've been using it since 2000. That's my context.
Yeah.
So, and back in the day, JavaScript 2000 was you could do math and like a couple little animations.
Right. So even math in JavaScript up until very recently was horrible. Right.
Oh,
you couldn't do like floats correct. I mean, they still have issues with like floats and longs and all these like math primitives. Right. The language was great, but let's not make any bones about it. It was written in 2 weeks. Right. I mean, that's when JavaScript was written, 2 weeks. So it's a very simple language. There are people that are working on compilers of JavaScript, right? And so I think I heard one the other day was called Elm, where it basically compiles into JavaScript, but because it compiles, it actually gives you all the errors, which is kind of nice for client-side JavaScript. But I mean, JavaScript is eating the world, right? So whether we like it or not, I think it's something that we're going to have to just get comfortable with it and use it, right?
I mean, think it's a very easily adopted language.
Yeah. It's very simple, and it's just you can do some horrible things with it. And now, by the way, you're
kind of like PHP and Perl. I'd put it in that category.
Yeah, it is. Well, worse because now they have WebAssembly, which we talked about the last time, right? So
that scares me. Writing assembly for the browser?
Yeah. No. So you're going to be able to run assembly in the browser, right? So that's going to be fun. And it's interesting, right? So, you know, I work at, it's funny, I'm the web app guy, right? But I work at Cisco, and we kind of, you know, we're seeing this stuff. And it's interesting to see how much of the basic networking technology that we're all comfortable with is moving towards web-based technologies. And just the whole world getting eaten by JavaScript, right? It's in your desktop. It's running inside of messaging applications, and it's a very loosely tight, very unforgiving language. Like this, just this year, I think, or maybe it's about to get released. they're about to have the concept of a class, right?
Yeah,
Where
was it ECMA2, right?
so like now, like today, right? If you look at it, it's ES 2016 or something, or maybe 2017 is when they're going to do it. But it's funny because like we're talking about something last time called an IIFE, right? I had to look this up. It's an immediately invoked function, right? So basically, like you call an anonymous function, so function no name, right? And then when you want to call the no name function, you just put the 2 parens and it runs, right? And I was like, why on God's earth would you want to do this, right? So I looked it up. The reason you want to do this is because you can, like Apollo said, right? You can override names, function names, right? So in order to make sure that your code doesn't stomp on somebody else's code, don't give it a name, right? And you can have...
Wow. We're just going to not give it a name.
Yeah.
That's a very JavaScript thing to do.
I've just been,
Yeah.
that is the second time this month that I've been horrified by some programming. Everyone just needs to stop and go read Microsoft Press Code Complete and just get back to basics and just write good code. Good Lord.
Believe it or not, probably the most sane language right now, and this is going to sound, I'm not a Microsoft guy. I don't have Visual Studio. I don't do anything in those languages. But like C# is starting to look like a really sane language, you know?
Yeah, I've heard the same.
compared to everything else we built. You know, that's just the way it is.
Interesting. Yeah, the other one was in Nginx where you can't have a conditional not or a conditional and. That's interesting because you have to basically test for a variable, and if that condition is true, you set a variable to a value, and then you test the other condition, and if that's true, you take your value from your first condition and you append it to your second condition. Then you have a third conditional statement that tests if that variable has both of those parts from the previous if statements, and if that's true. That's how you had. I was like, what? I'm like, that is. I am not putting that in production. It's very similar to like a function not having a name.
So wait, this is a web server you're talking about,
Nginx.
right?
Inside of inside of Nginx, yes, you can actually do limited conditions, but one of the limitations is there's no conditional not or a multi-conditional if statement with an and.
This is Nginx we're talking about, right? This is a web server.
But as Apollo very quickly pointed out, he's like they're doing that for performance reasons.
That's what
right?
I think.
I think you're right. You take a performance hit for doing the not.
Yeah, I think they're doing it for performance. That's my guess.
Isn't it safe to say that most of all of this is being done for performance reasons?
Pretty much. I think a lot of it, you're right, Jeff, is very much performance driven, which I think is a great summary for this segment. Greatly impacts security, right? There's the inverse. Yep. What increases performance decreases security. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Noodle on that. While we take a break, Moses, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. When's the next time you're teaching a SANS class so people can spend an entire 6 days with you, which would be awesome?
I should know this. Let's see. August. I'm teaching in Virginia Beach.
Awesome.
2017. So.
Oh, wow.
Awesome. Moses, thank you so much for coming back on Paul Security Weekly. I learned a lot from this segment. It was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Me too. That was great.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're welcome.
We'll take a short break, come back, bring in our friends from Javelin Networks to make some Windows admins cry. We'll be right back. Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Quick announcement before we get into it. The first B-Sides in Uganda is B-Sides Kampala. That's right. A conference is being held October 14th through the 15th. CFP is open until July 15th. They're looking for talks on network and web application security, innovative attack and defense strategies, malware analysis, evolutionary computing, robotics, and bonus points if you bring an actual robot. Visit bsideskampala.com to submit your talk today. And here with us, joining us again on the show, we welcome back Guy from Javelin Networks, who is here to make Windows admins cry. I hear you collect the tears from Windows admins, and it gives you strength as a hacker. Is that true, Guy?
Mm-hmm. One by one, yeah, that's true. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm good. How are you, Guy? And I can, as you and others from Javelin Networks have been doing segments on the show, we've been, of course, talking about Active Directory security, mentioning Javelin, and I think it's awesome what you guys do, and I think it's a huge, as Michael Santarcangelo loves to ask the question, what problem you're trying to solve. It's a huge problem that is one of those things like people don't either know they have a problem or know how severe it is. So today, Guy, what is your focus for today's segment?
Okay, so today I'm going to focus basically on the central issue here with the Active Directory, and basically it's how easy it is to get admin privileges with almost nothing. So right now what I'm going to show you is a little demo of small scenarios. How can I obtain a domain admin without any much of a problems? So we'll present a few use cases here. We will start with powerful user enumerations and move on to different techniques to actually obtain the domain admin. And afterwards, I'll show you a few techniques on how to maintain the privileges after you actually got the domain admin for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, because if there's for example, a user in the domain admins group, if I'm discovered, can't they just kick me out?
Yeah, so one of the things exactly with domain admin is that some of the time they need to rotate the password more frequently. So if you're back into the network after a month, it could be the privileges you got can be already gone. Another issue with it is, again, that domain admins as more strict. Basically, nowadays, with more PAM solution and stuff like that, it's much harder to maintain the domain admin. So for me as an attacker, after I gain these privileges, I'm going to save it, basically save my status in few different techniques like golden tickets and others. So once I get back into the network, I'll be able to gain the same amount of privileges without any much problems, and I could maintain this persistency for as many years as I want.
That's awesome. Awesome. I like it. Windows admins don't like it so much, but I like it.
So wait, you tell me I need to change my passwords, Paul.
Yeah.
But I had a really, really good password.
Oh, it's so much. The rabbit hole is so much deeper than that.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to share my screen right now, and we'll start with a quick demo. And if we have time, some time on the end, I'm going to show a little bit of the product and what exactly Javelin can do to block this type of activity and attack. So 1 second.
This is the segment where Apollo and I, we take sanction in the fact that we are Linux admins and not Windows admins.
Yeah, we have to just deal with SSH.
Yeah. And systemd to a certain extent. We'll talk about that next.
Nice. Okay. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to show a few use cases. Basically, as an attacker, once I get a foothold on a machine that is connected to the domain, it's most of the time it's game over for the admin or for the organization, because in few very easy to make methods, I can actually obtain domain admin very quickly. And I'm going to show you right now some of these techniques. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to open a PowerShell here. And I'm going to run first a few commands to understand what is the user that I'm currently connected with. I can see that the user is Mike. The domain name is called McDonald's.
Could you make your text a little bit bigger?
Yeah, sure. Of course.
I'm having a little hard time reading it.
Apollo.
1 second.
Yep.
Is it better?
That's better. Yep.
Thank you.
Great. So I'll run it again. We can see that the user that is connected is Mike. The domain called McDonald's. I'll also fetch the group policy of the current user account connected. So I'll understand what are the privileges I currently have as this user. So I can see I'm only a domain user. I don't have any sort of special privileges in the domain. But it's fine. I'm going to get it anyway. I can also see that I'm part of the local administrator group, which is pretty cool because I can do a lot of stuff just by being a local administrator on this PC, like launching Mimikatz and other tools that would enable me to grab credentials very quickly. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to start with few easy enumeration to first understand who are the high privilege accounts inside the environment. So there are the domain admin groups, which basically it's a default group that anyone can query. I can do it with few easy commands like launching the netgroups command to enumerate the domain admin. This will give me at least the knowledge who are the high privilege accounts inside the environment. There are many other ways to also gain more information about the high privilege accounts. It doesn't have to be in the domain admins group. For example, what I can actually do is I can search in the directory, basically on specific filtering on the LDAP query. I can filter upon specific attribute called admin count. This will also give me all the high privilege account without even enumerating the group. So I can see a bunch of high privilege accounts here that are connected to the, that are basically part of the environment. And from this point, I can do several stuff. I can either launch script that will try to brute force this user account using the account lockout policy. So if, for example, I'll find out the account policy 3 times per hour, I can maintain basically a password guessing script that will try each and every one of the user account at least 3 times an hour. And in this way, I might get at least 1 user account after maybe a few days or weeks. But I want to do it much faster. And to do that, I'm going to need to do some more enumeration. So what I'll do, I'll also enumerate the domain computers group to understand who are the computers that are part of the domain. I can also use a bunch of automated tools like bloodhounds to do the same kind of stuff basically for me. But I'm going to show you basically on very, let's call it step-by-step on how exactly it's being performed. So right now I can see a bunch of computers here. Only by looking on name scheme I can see, for example, a bunch of interesting computers here that might contain the domain admin. For example, I can see here a CDO computer. So let's try to find out who is logged into this computer. So right here I have really famous tool called PS Logged On. I don't have to use this tool. I can also use the Win API to gain the same kind of call, and I can enumerate what are the current user accounts that are connected to this machine. And we can see here, for my surprise, there is a user account called MS SQL admin that is connected to this computer. Now, this user account, if I'll enumerate the domain admins, we'll see that is part of this group. Meaning, if I'll get to this computer, to the Win8 CDO, I can actually grab the credentials that are currently connected there. So we can see that the MS SQL admin is part of the domain admin group. So it gives me a good way to actually obtain these credentials. So there are a few ways I can actually perform a lateral movement to this computer. I can use, for example, the local admin on the system. So most of the organization today using the same image for most of their machine. Now, when they're using this image, they're using the same administrator password over and over again across all the machines in the network.
Right, because
So
they haven't implemented laps, so it's the same credentials on every machine. Right.
Mm-hmm. So we don't see laps being deployed in many organizations today. I guess it's kind of hard to deploy it. You need to change the scheme, and you need to train your system to use the Active Directory whenever you want to get a new local administrator on one machine. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of hard to maintain it. So most of the time when you get into organization, you see in very easy method, you can see who are the user accounts, where are they connected to, and using local admin traversal, you can move to this computer and obtain the domain admin. Now, I won't do this demo right now. I'll do another demo that's it's even cooler. Basically, what I'll do right now is I'll enumerate all these service accounts that are registered in the Active Directory. Now, the LDAP query I'm currently running is querying for specific users that are registered with a specific application. That means that this application running on specific server inside the environment. Now, when I run this command, we will see basically all the user accounts that are registered with this application. So, for example, we can see here the IIS admin, which is also part of the domain admins group. So we can see, or the MS SQL admin, which is also the part of the this I'm sorry, of this domain admins group. And basically, what we can see here is on which server does this user account runs right now. We can see it runs under a server called win2k12-mssql-1. Now, what it means is when I'll ask ticket for this service from the Active Directory, the ticket is going to be encrypted using the account password of this user account. Now, what it actually gives me is an ability to brute force the password without even authenticating with the domain. And the way to get it is basically to request a ticket for this server.
And the ticket's encrypted with the user's password, so you can then brute force the password using the ticket.
Correct.
And
That's correct. So right now what I
Well, I think I just to back up, and I think the way that it sometimes plays out in my head when we talk about these types of attacks, especially when we talk about Mimikatz, is you think, well, if I have all my user desktops and they get infected with malware, malware is using Mimikatz to pull credentials out of memory, that as long as I'm not logging in with administrator credentials to my desktops or I'm clearing out their cache of my credentials in memory, I'm okay. What you're showing is that's really not okay and how to work around that.
Exactly. So even if you don't have any administrator in the network, many of the time the service accounts have I privileges by themselves.
That's awesome.
Because, service account, for example, you do a service account for IIS servers. Now, usually they use the same service account across all the servers. That means that this IIS admin has access to all of these servers. Now, what I can do right now, what I did right now, I asked for a ticket for this remote service. Now, when I check the tickets currently in memory, I'll be able to see this ticket right in memory here. So we can see this ticket. Now, what I can do, I can actually dump this ticket and then crack it locally. This is what I'll show you right now. So I have Mimikatz here that will help me to dump this ticket
Now, is this the same as pass the hash or something different?
No, it's not.
It's
not
different.
the same.
Different.
Okay.
Different attack. Yeah,
Sorry.
correct.
I'm stupid with Windows.
No, it's a different ball. It's a different sport altogether than Linux.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to enter the Mimikatz. And I'm going to export now all the tickets of that on the current machine. So
are tickets like auth tokens?
Kerberos tickets.
Kerberos tickets, okay.
Kerberos tickets, yeah, exactly. Now I'm
the other thing, Paul,
tickets.
that's really cool there is that Mimikatz is running as a shell command, which I think is awesome. A lot of people don't even realize you could do that.
Oh, you can run it directly from the command line.
Well, you could always run Mimikatz from the command line, but he dropped himself into a Mimikatz shell.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people don't. Yeah.
That's cool.
So right now we can see all the tickets in the machine that are dumped now on the hard drive. Now I don't really need to use Mimikatz to do that. There are other tools that I can use to basically break the ticket in memory without putting it inside the ELSA's process, and then use the binary in order to crack it. So I don't really need even special privileges on the computer in order to do that. So here we can see the ticket that I currently dumped from this computer, the MS SQL service. Now I'll copy this ticket to another machine here that basically it doesn't have to run on the network. It could be on the cloud or whatever. And using a tool here that we actually built, I'm going to crack this ticket. Basically, I'm going to brute force this ticket, trying all sorts of password until I'll be able to decrypt the ticket using specific password. So here, what I'm going to do.
What's the encryption type?
Currently, the encryption type it's. Well, let me check here. So the encryption type currently is RC4. It's the default.
Okay.
Now, this is a tool that we actually built using also John the Reaper with few modification. Yeah, that would help us to brute force very easily all sorts of tickets using very well-known, domain passwords. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to launch this tool, and I'm going to crack this ticket account. Now it's going to run and try to brute force the password, and voila. We can actually see right now that we were able to crack this ticket. We can see the password of this that was encrypted of the ticket. We can see it's caps lock A and A, 1Q, 2W, 3E, 4R. So basically, I can right now copy this password, and I can use it right now to get my privileges higher. So I'll just a second. We'll check if this user account with this password work.
So that's the MySQL user's password, correct?
Exactly. Now, when I'll try to use this password, we can see that it actually works.
That's awesome.
Now, instead of using this user account, I don't want to draw myself too much attention. What I'll do, I'll create persistency on the Active Directory that if someone will ever change this MS SQL admin user account, it won't matter for me. I want to maintain persistency for long time. And one of the best way probably to do it is by generating a golden ticket. Now, the way to generate a golden ticket is basically to get to the Active Directory, one of the domain controllers, and steal specific hash of a user account called KERB-TGT. Now, the KERB-TGT is the master key that from this master key, the domain controller generates all the tickets inside the system. And what it means is once I steal the KERB-TGT, I can actually create the same kind of operation the domain controllers do to generate tickets, but only from my use. So basically, I will be able to generate ticket for anywhere in the environment to get any amount of privileges that I want, and I can give this ticket a limitation for, let's say, 20 years. So I can use the same ticket over and over again for 20 years in the same organization, and no one will ever catch me, and no one will ever, no matter what, if they try to change the password, if they try to do stuff like that, it won't matter because I'm using the master key of the domain controller.
That TGT, that the ticket, you're stealing the, gaining access to the ticket granting ticket, and then making yourself a ticket that.
Exactly.
I gotcha.
Exactly. And this is what I'm going to show you right now. So, 1 second. The way I'll do it is, first of all, now I have a domain admin. So it means that I have access to the DCs in the environment. So I'll query who are the DCs in the environment, and I'll just select one of them. So let's take the PDC here, the MSDC2. I'll copy their mimikatz. I'll use the same account that I just stolen.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. Now I'll run psexec across the DC. Using the same account I just stolen.
So you basically use the domain admin credentials to run a command in the domain controller to access the ticket granting ticket to make your own tickets, to make your user ticket, right?
Exactly.
Is it called a user ticket? It's not a user ticket. What is that called? There's a different name for it. It's Kerberos language.
You mean I'm going to now basically steal the KERP-TGT. This is what I'm going to show you right now.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So let's jump to this server.
When I worked at university, our single sign-on application used LDAP and Kerberos, not Windows, like straight LDAP and Kerberos as its single sign-on art. So that's why I know like a tiny bit. I had no idea how it worked. I'm sure it was horribly vulnerable, but I just like understood very basic things.
My university used PeopleSoft.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
So basically right now what you can see here is the hash of the KERP-TGT. From this hash, the domain controllers basically generate all the tickets inside the environment. Now, I only need to get this KERP-TGT and the domain SID to actually generate this ticket. Now, I'll copy the command for ticket granting tickets. I'll use the hash here.
Guy, are you? Might have just gone out. Guy, are you using Windows tools to do this, or is there some other kind of?
No, it's all through Windows. I don't even need to use Linux. It's all basically part of what Microsoft allows me to do. So right now, I'll just open again mimikatz. And I'll use this command in order to generate my ticket. Okay, that's it. I now created a ticket called Administrator Kirby. Now, this ticket will be valid for 20 years. We'll be able to see it right now. What I'll do right now is something called pass the hash. So now after I actually generated the ticket, what I can do, I can pass the ticket basically to anywhere to the DC in order to gain any ticket that I want. So I created a TGT that is valid for 20 years. Now I'm going to use this ticket. Oh. Sorry. What happened here? second. Sorry.
So, Guy, this is Tim Medine talked about this research at DerbyCon a year or two ago, correct?
Yeah. So this stuff is basically a well-known thing in the intelligence usually, and it became very public on the recent Black Hats, I think, from 2014. And nowadays it's very well used. Basically, once again, a golden ticket. Basically, it's valid for as many years as I want, and I can use it over and over again on the same domain, basically gaining all the time all the privileges that I need.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tim Medine's attack is not the golden ticket attack. You're right. The golden ticket attack was a Black Hat presentation, like you mentioned, and kind of quietly mentioned that it was used in the intelligence community before that. I won't ask you any further because we don't want a drone strike.
Sure. So I think we have a little bit more time. So what I'll do right now, I want to show a little bit what our product can actually do. So I'm going to enter
sorry, just going back to the attack. So with the golden ticket, did you generate a hash and then use pass the hash to authenticate inside the domain?
Yeah. So let's go again over the steps. So what I did is, first of all, I got a domain admin using something called Kerber hosting. So I actually crack a ticket that I requested from the domain controller. I was able to crack this ticket because it was running under a specific service account. Now, once I get the service account credentials, what I did is I stole the curb TGT from the domain controller, basically the master key. Then I use this master key in order to generate myself a TGT that will last for a very long time. Now, this TGT has a domain admin privileges. Now, it could be any user I want. Basically, generating the ticket, I can disguise to even user that doesn't really exist in the environment. The way, the reason I can do it is because there are two phases for the authentication of Microsoft. One for requesting TGT when you enter username and password. It's basically your ID in the network. And once you get the TGT and it's signed by the curb TGT, you can request using this TGT tickets from any domain controller in the environment.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Great. So if you have some time, I want to share a little bit of how can Javelin actually disrupt any of these phases. So what I'll do right now, I'm going to deploy the protection on this computer. I'm currently showing the demo, and we're going to see what would look like any sort of this enumeration when I'll try now to perform them again from this computer. So now let's say again that I want to enumerate the domain admins. Now, when I'll do that, I'm going to see when Javelin is deployed, I'm going to see many more domain admins that most of them are not real. Basically, at this point, when anyone is trying to brute force any of this user account, we immediately get a notification in a dashboard. The same goes also for service accounts. So let's say, for example, someone will try to enumerate again the service account. Is going to see, if you remember before, we only saw 3 service accounts. Now we can see many more service accounts that are registered for many servers here, that most of them, again, doesn't exist. And let's say, again, now that I want to crack a ticket in the environment that doesn't exist. And again, most of the tickets here that you see, most of the service accounts here and the assets that you see doesn't really exist. So let's say, for example, I want to use this service account. I want to try to crack it. What I'll do is I'll try to request a ticket for this server. And when I'll do it, I'll basically fail because this service doesn't really exist in the system. It's something we actually create only on the endpoint itself without having the attacker any ability to know that it's been actually created. Now, when I'll do it, of course, I'll fail. It will tell me that it couldn't find this ticket in memory, but we'll get a new alarm in the dashboard immediately, indicating us that someone is trying to request tickets from the directory service that doesn't really exist. And he did it by actually querying before the domain controllers, meaning he's trying to actually crack tickets in the system. Now,
So I want to add. So obviously, you're providing false information to the attacker. But if they happen to get lucky and choose a ticket or an account that's real, would you still flag on that behavior because it is somewhat anomalous? For example, that like a user workstation is all of a sudden trying to access a ticket that was for a service that's on another system, right? Like that in and of itself is also anomalous. But Javelin software also monitors for that behavior as well, correct?
Yeah, so we monitor this, but we don't really flag about it because it's basically legitimate to request ticket for it.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone is going to this server, it will automatically request ticket for this server if it's real one. And there is no way to know if it's a legitimate query or illegitimate query.
Right.
So it's hard to differentiate between an actual user versus an automated service.
Attacker in this.
Exactly.
Right. But what Javelin does is create a bunch of fake information, and so if you access the fake information, then you get an error.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like a honeypot kind of thing.
Yeah. Don't use that word, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, usually when you get to environment, you won't do it for just one service account. You will try to do it for all the service accounts. So, it usually takes much more time to crack the password. I use, very simple password, but if it's a little bit more complicated, it might take me to brute force it much, much longer.
You're going to leave a trail. Like when they create that deceptive information, you're going to leave a trail that's is going to create all kinds of alerts in the dashboard because you're going to access the not real information.
And again, now we can see here in the dashboard that once I try to request a ticket for a computer or server that doesn't exist, we automatically get a notification in the dashboard, also indicating us what were the user account compromised. And we also will be able to see what were the processes that were involved in this attack.
That's awesome. Yeah, so when it does alert on the fake information, you see everything all of the attacks that occurred.
Nice.
Exactly.
The thing is, too, that strikes me as a very low false positive.
Well, yeah, if they're yes, exactly. Because users are going to request request to get tickets for legitimate services in legitimate accounts.
The thing here that this type of attack is happening a lot, and it's very, very, very hard, if not impossible, to actually find out about it. Because how can you really know if someone requesting a ticket because he wants to connect to the SQL server, or someone is requesting a ticket because he wants to crack it?
Right.
That's the thing here. So it's part of how the ticketing mechanism of Microsoft works. And by design, it enables me to actually crack accounts that are registered with the Active Directory using specific services.
That's awesome, Guy. Thank you so much for all of that information. That was fantastic. It's kind of interesting. We're going to cover a story in our next segment. Someone wrote a very interesting article, very opinionated, that basically said if you run Windows as your operating systems, you're doing a terrible job at security and should be fired. That's what he said. I would think you would agree with someone, as controversial as that statement is. I think it speaks to the situation that 90% of organizations out there are in if you're running after Active Directory.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's the best way to manage stuff. To manage your assets, it's the best way. So I don't think that Active Directory will be vanished from the world, but we need to find very creative way to stop this type of activities that it's exposed by design, because there is no other way to deal with this kind of stuff.
So it's an architectural flaw.
There's not just one. Flaws, plural.
So it's more of an architectural flaw versus a configuration flaw.
Yes. Both. There are some configurations that can help. Of course, that was a great segue into other things that Javelin Network software does, and you monitor for. Is it over 20 common misconfigurations in Active Directory, Guy?
That's correct. So we have another component that is called the AD assessment. So the AD assessment search for this specific persistency that I talked to you about. For example, ability to create, for example, ability to see a golden ticket basically on the network, or curved TGT that hasn't been reset for a long period of time. So not many knows about it, but it's Microsoft best practice to reset the curved TGT at least twice a year. This way, if someone already own your environment and create for himself a golden ticket, the next time you reset the curved TGT, this golden ticket basically worth nothing. So there are many other, of course, persistency types. I can do a lot of stuff, for example, by disguising specific privileges under regular user account. Now, this is also very strong kind of persistency, because this way I can look like as a regular user, but in reality, I could have a domain admin privileges without anyone actually knowing about it. So we look for this kind of persistency and also misconfiguration that IT has done in the environment that can jeopardize all the domain. So it's a continuous assessment that basically assess for this kind of persistency and misconfiguration. And whenever we found something like that, we just alert about it and telling you exactly how to mitigate it.
Fantastic, Guy. Thank you so much for sharing this knowledge with us. Javelin-networks.com if you want to learn more. And thank you very much for showing, if you review the technical segment, all the commands are in there that Guy showed, many of them native Windows commands. So thank you so much, Guy.
Sure. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
With that, we're going to take a short break, come back, talk about the security news for this week. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Logarithm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logarithm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Stream over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand. Premium annual memberships include all video content as well as access to virtual labs and the Q&A forums. You'd pay $85.70 a month or $857 per year, but we have a special offer for our listeners. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your active subscription, visit itpro.tv/Security Weekly and use the discount code SW30. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Make sure you come check out Wild West Hackin' Fest. It is put on by Black Hills Information Security, October 27th and the 28th. Make sure you register today, although currently I believe the tickets are sold out. There might be another round of tickets, which it's just awesome. Jeff and I will be presenting. There's really, and Larry, really no one else. I mean, it's just going to be myself, Jeff, and Larry, maybe John. We'll be there. So make sure you come check out, like the four of us. Yeah, a couple other people, but mostly the four of us will be presenting. So it's a lot of fun. WildWestHackingFest.com.
Are we gonna be able to broadcast from there? Because aren't we there on a Thursday?
By then, Jeff, that is definitely a possibility. I like your thinking. I like your thinking.
We could have some fun.
Yes, I agree. Provided we can get some good internet.
Yeah, do they have internet in South Dakota?
They have some, like a little.
The thing is, what you do is you put your packets on the back of buffaloes.
That's right. Yes.
You put your packets on the back of buffaloes, and the buffaloes take the packets out for you.
It's called a steer network. That's right.
This is why we never see John anymore. Yeah.
Well, smoke signals was the first use of binary.
We've had a lot of smoke signals going on since Apollo got here. We killed a lot of cigars. We burned some pipe tobacco.
I just want to say, too, the cigar I first started with was this tall. It was a double Corona. I'm just now finishing it.
It's awesome. Burned some cigars. It was great. Moses, what was your, and you've watched some of the Javelin Networks tech segments, but what's your assessment of Active Directory security being one of the instructors for the SANS pen test curriculum?
Well, I mean, it's understood, right? We know how to break it, and we know how to kind of help fix it. Question is, what's the alternative? Is it going to be like configuration management? Because nobody's really pen testing that. So
yeah,
let's give it like 5 years, and then maybe in 5 years.
Directory.
Yeah, okay. In Novell, we could go back to Novell.
We could go back to Novell. Now, someone suggests, and I have to start out with the story because this just is one of the most brash statements. I get that it was probably done on purpose, and this person is in the Linux community.
Are you trying to say someone online is making a strong accusation that's going to get everyone pissed off?
Brian Lunduke. Yeah, so you're right, Apollo. It's not the first time someone's made this statement. Brian is a writer and works as a social media marketing manager of SUSE. Basically wrote an article. And so just to put that in context, right?
Hey, OpenSUSE is not bad.
So, I mean, you talk about rocking the boat. He says, in the wake of yet another ransomware attack, this time named NotPetya, I have a special message specifically for those of you working in organizations that continue to run Microsoft Windows as the operating system on either your servers or desktops. You are doing a terrible job and should probably be fired. And he says, I know that's harsh, but it's true. If you haven't replaced Windows across the board, you absolutely stink at your job.
Wow.
Well, we would all be secure if everyone tried to run the steaming pile of SUSE.
Yeah, well, I get that. I see what you're going. Apollo and I being Linux folks, I agree. I never got on the SUSE bandwagon.
I mean, it's popular in Europe.
It It is popular. Like Ask Grabby Grabby,
No.
it is popular.
They're playing by European rules over there.
They are, and that's fine.
So I mean, Linux on the desktop. I've been trying to run it for years upon years, and where do you begin? It's unusable.
No, I disagree, Moses.
Ubuntu.
I disagree, Moses. I don't think it's unusable. I will put some caveats on that. I did buy a System 76 laptop. I've been using it for several months. I love it. It's very usable. However, I'm on Ubuntu 17.04. There is there is a very weird bug in the kernel driver for the graphics driver somewhere that like my screen blanks out every once in a while and then comes back. Yeah, which is really highly annoying. So I get that.
LTS.
Other than that, I should have stayed with it. I know I was on the bleeding edge. But having said that, in my normal workflow processes for a lot of the things I do around here at Security Weekly, I have a Mac as my primary desktop.
Yeah. Ironically,
so I agree with you in that step, Moses. Like, yeah.
Ironically, if you run Ubuntu 16.04 LTS on a Mac, any of them, they're actually really well supported.
Yeah, interesting.
So
still there's a lot of tools.
We've been bashing Windows for how long has there been Windows? And the argument has always been, at least that I've heard, that it was because it was so common that it's so full of holes and so vulnerable. If there was an alternative out there, any of the flavors of Unix or Linux you're talking about, if any of those flavors were as prevalent as Windows, I still kind of lean towards we'd be finding all sorts of bugs and vulnerabilities and architectural flaws in the other operating systems as well.
So, Jack,
we do have some alternatives, and it pains me to say these because I hate using them. I loathe using them. But I just spent most of this month in Europe, and I traveled with an iPhone and a Chromebook.
So, Jack, I was going to ask you, as a former mechanic, I'm sure you follow this. What is the most commonly stolen vehicles in America?
The cheap, high-volume Japanese cars are traditionally Corollas and Accords.
Toyota Corollas and Honda Accords and Civics.
Honda Civics. Mm-hmm. You know what else?
Yeah, it's the ones that everybody drives so that they can steal parts to use on other cars.
Because the parts have a high...
It's chop shops.
Yeah, so they're not necessarily the worst. It's just that they're the most common. The ones that are most common are the ones most often attacked.
Yeah.
And, if you do it as a percentage of the population, there are some outliers. Like a few years ago when BMW started all their keyless entry, keyless stuff, they were all getting ripped off right and left in Europe because people would walk up with early SDR and just drive away with them. But, yes, it's a big target. But, iOS, every time I pick up my phone, I wish that iOS wasn't such a backwards operating system compared to Android as far as power and flexibility and configuration. However, it works. You trying to use a Chromebook if you're used to having anything that resembles a computer drives you stark raving mad. But on the other hand, I spent a month in Europe and I was actually functional. I mean, now granted, I wasn't compiling video. I wasn't, writing code. But I was able to, through, the Chrome browser, do pretty much everything I needed. It was kind of tedious, but the keyboard on the crappy little Chromebook. But I specifically bought a like $165, $170 one so that I could throw it in a garbage can if I wanted.
Yeah, I find Jack, the newer Samsung Chromebook that I have here, the keyboard's really nice, actually.
I just wanted something so cheap that if there was any question, I could just throw it away. Although one of the things I did notice is that power washing doesn't actually scrub them as thoroughly as you would expect them to. Browser plugins don't get flushed. At least I've got to test that. But anyway, these are restricted. The attack surface is reduced. Chromebook is Linux on the desktop, sort of. And
Gen 2. Gen 2 actually, so it is Linux on the desktop.
Yeah,
and it is. They're functional. And if you have users that don't need to do the stuff that all of us and most of our listeners take for granted, they're actually a decent option. The chances for exploitation are lower. I'm sure there's still it's Linux. There's horrible crap in libraries all throughout Linux, and somebody's going to find something. But the attack surface is lower. Things are dramatically tighter. The ecosystem for iOS is much more locked down than Android, although Android's getting better. For a lot of folks, there is an option. But to go back to SUSE, I'd like to see you manage 10,000 desktops and 6,000 or 8,000 servers across server closets and remote locations to data centers to multiple cloud instances. The cloud stuff there are tools for, but if you're trying to manage your on-premises stuff, you're going to put a lot of faith into Tivoli or whatever tools you use, but I'm not sure it's deserved. That's the thing. There are a lot of things people like to use. People don't want to spend as much as they spend on Windows licensing. If you want to talk about a threat, the cost of licensing and support is savage. But he wanted to start an argument, and it worked. But had it not been SUSE, which I spent years fighting. He might have, had this come out of, Shuttleworth's company. If this had come out of Canonical, I might have thought, or had this come out of Red Hat, I'm like, well, satellite's a nightmare, but once you get it running, you really can manage all sorts of stuff.
Well, I think it's, it comes down with Windows. I think you bring up some great points, Jack. As much as, I think as we just proved with Active Directory, Windows security-wise is not great, certainly. But if you're going to manage 50,000 plus endpoints as an example, having some of that ease of use and those features that Windows has to allow for connectivity and authentication to all those services and applications and make that easy, that's been some of the security shortcomings. However, it allows you to have 50,000 plus managed hosts all on the same platform. If you tried to do that from a desktop perspective with another operating system, your management would be a complete nightmare. And Windows, because it's been adopted as the de facto standard for PCs as an operating system, benefits from support for drivers, which is what I was describing in the beginning, right? Like my Linux drivers aren't that great because it's not running on billions of endpoints, right?
And the thing is, too, you could get around that by running Mac all the time, but that's expensive.
Yeah.
It's really expensive.
Well, if you forget about implementation costs and the time it would take to do it, I could almost envision the future where, since so many enterprise applications are going to be in the cloud, and basically you run everything from a browser, you could potentially run a stripped down bare bones system. But I mean, that's a variation of what we were talking about earlier. With all the features comes more vulnerabilities, and the more people want to do different cool things and do it quickly and seamlessly, that it just automatically introduces more issues.
So my enterprise friends, what they do is they give all of their users within the company, a really dumb laptop, usually a ThinkPad of some kind, and they're all booting remote VMs that are kept on-prem. So that way, when you boot up your machine early on in the day, you're not running your local OS. You're actually pulling down an image from the company's servers and then running that, which is really nice. Centralized services, centralized management of the OS.
If you can make that work, I like that strategy.
Oh, no,
it is expensive because users need a lot of horsepower to run that, and you have to manage all that. I mean, and the network has to be robust enough to support that as well.
So my father, who works for a large multimedia company, they do that. I have friends who work for pharmaceutical companies. They do that. That's standard for them, for their business laptops.
Well,
that's hard. It's expensive.
What's crazy, Paul, is let's say that we get our wish, right? Linux or Mac on the desktops and no more Windows, right? And then you're going, great, no more Active Directory, no more Windows. Well, how do I manage permissions on files? Because we really rely on Windows for that, right? I mean, you could do it in Unix, but that can be a pain point for a lot of people. How do you do permissions on files? Just that one thing will drive you crazy in a company of 50,000 computers.
Yeah, and I think from security perspective, we poke fun at the fact how helpful Microsoft and Microsoft protocols are at allowing users to find things like Moses saying files and services and applications and authenticate to them. And largely the attacks that we know and love today that are successful are basically hinged on the fact that Microsoft's operating systems and protocols like to be helpful. But it's that helpfulness that allows us, like Moses is saying, to have that managed environment and have everything work.
So it frustrates me just the core of my being as a developer, on the side of designer, it's the struggle between usability versus security.
Yeah, no, it is. I think that's the heart of this argument that the author didn't really delve into, and I think a lot of folks that are very heavy on the Linux side don't delve into that. Crossroads of usability and security and where
doing
they
things
play.
in Linux, you really got to dig in the internals, and it sucks. Even you got to do a little bit of that on the Mac side. With Windows, it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it works.
Until Windows 10.
Once you're on Windows 10, if you're on Windows 10 and you've gotten used to it, make sure you install the creators update, because you will fall in loathe all over again. Eventually, but the great thing is, it's like Windows 98. I found after the creators update, I fix everything by just rebooting until it works just like Windows 98. As with the anniversary update before, these big updates are just steaming piles of shit.
Mm.
And they like lose all sorts of pointers and references and recent objects. They just rewrite all sorts of things. But I found that if you reboot 2 or 3 times, everything comes back up, and that's on a couple of different
2 to 3
systems.
times is the magic. Now, Jack, you having traveled internationally recently, what are your thoughts on some of the new travel bans on laptops and devices larger than a smartphone?
Yeah, I didn't run into any of that, but that's why I took a small Chromebook. And, candidly, I didn't worry about it flying into the UK. I certainly didn't worry about it flying into Norway, didn't worry about it flying into Denmark. As I was at the airport in Copenhagen, I power washed the Chromebook and logged back in, so there was some data on there and one disposable Gmail account, and put it away, and nobody asked anything. But of course, I've got Nexus and Global Entry and all of those things. So I fast-tracked through. But even at that, I was like, I'm not going to trust people. And even with, some history in the Chromebook, I wasn't worried about it. It's not like I VPN'd back to the corporate network or accessed anything terribly sensitive. I wasn't doing online banking from whatever apartment or hotel I was in the fjords. So
and you didn't lose any of the pictures of suffering bastards' travels.
No, well, that was the one thing I did. That's all on the iPhone. So it's all, yes, I know everybody's just grown now. It's all iClouded, but it's not like I'm taking pictures of my credit cards and posting them on and storing them on iCloud. Except for my Bank of America card, I did take a picture of that.
I did see that, and I'm still working on digitally recreating that for you.
That's all right. Once you figure that out, you'll discover that I closed that account and then shredded the card because screw those people.
Okay, I'm going to brag a little bit.
Go ahead.
I want to show you these things. If you guys can see them in my hands. These are 128 gigabyte cards. These little micro SSDs.
Yep.
So in theory, I could put a laptop up that has no storage, like no SSDs, nothing in it. I plug one of these things in, the entire OS is there. And on the off chance the TSA asks me what's going on,
you can swallow it.
I can swallow it. I could swallow my computer. Just saying.
What does it taste like?
Does Linux, now, if you put Linux on one and Windows on another, do they taste different? Does the Windows taste sour?
Well, that's why you put Linux Mint on it.
If you do that, I think they'll tackle you at the airport. So,
yeah, they will lock you in an empty room with a coffee can.
That's right. That's right. What was it? Oh, back to Jack's point about Apple iOS. Jack, my frustrations with that are two things. One, iMessage is just annoying, and they don't allow you to move easily between different platforms at all. And the entire Apple ID iCloud experience is so weird. Like for example, my wife left her phone on the railing next to the pool, picked up my son. My son squirmed as 1-year-olds do and kicked my wife's iPhone 7 into the pool, sunk to the bottom. Not a good day. Thankfully, thank God for insurance. However, like I was trying to like get her back online somehow with whatever devices and SIM cards I have in the house. And like I ran into a situation where I tried to authenticate on her iPad to iCloud, and it said, "Oh, you have two-factor authentication, so I had to send you a message to your phone." I'm like,
other thing, yes.
I'm like, dude, my other thing is in the bottom of the damn pool. And so I took, what did I do? I took the SIM card out. No, I had to go to AT&T because my old phone was there's regular SIM, micro SIM, and nano SIM, and the new iPhones are nano SIM. So I had her number. Go to AT&T, put her number on a regular SIM, put it in my old Nexus device, and then it says, "Oh, we don't have to send it to your iPhone. Like, we can just text it to this number." I'm like, "Yeah, text it to that number." Got the text message on a Nexus device with the new SIM in it to be able to authenticate brand new iCloud to her. But that's the kind of stuff that really irks me.
Oh, come on. That's not bad usability at all. That's security.
When I tried to get my iPhone, my corporate iPhone, and my personal iPad, and then of course I added an Apple Watch into it because I drank all the Kool-Aid at once.
Yep.
I ended up, on the phone with a genius, maybe a sub-genius, and basically had to disable two-factor everywhere, disable all sorts of stuff, and then turn it on one step at a time, and that worked. But it took, I played for hours, or for an hour, and then called the sub-genius, and I could hear him just take a deep breath, like, "Oh God, I hate this." But eventually gave me, it's like authentication. So perhaps there's a reason that you can abuse authentication in Active Directory, and also you can authenticate.
Yeah, no, and it was the same thing with the Apple podcast. Like, we had this legacy account, and like back and forth with support, and they're basically like, "No, you can't manage your podcast, one of my podcasts, with the new thing just because." And it just really messed up. But along those lines, this article was, the journalism in this article was fantastic. You don't often find articles today with this level of journalism. Actually went to Italy and interviewed the 20-year-old individual who has an iPhone jailbreak for a brand new iPhone 7 that won't post it online.
Oh, my.
And, like, basically the journalist handed him his phone and said, "Yeah, go ahead, jailbreak it," and he jailbroke it.
Is he part of the Panda group?
Well, so this article talks about the whole jailbreaking community.
It's pretty cool.
It can be...
Not that I'm part of it.
It's, like, over now. Is essentially what the journalist uncovered is that, like, the whole jailbreaking community disbanded, essentially. So here's the quote that I pulled. It summarizes the article nicely. "Things have changed. The jailbreaking community is fractured, with many of its former members having joined private security firms or Apple itself. The few people still doing it privately are able to hold out for big payouts for finding iPhone vulnerabilities. And users themselves have stopped demanding jailbreaks because Apple simply took jailbreak as best ideas and implemented them into iOS. Or, you could just go buy a phone from Google and run Android." That last part was me, but yeah.
Like I said, I miss a lot of the power and flexibility and configuration of Android, but I've gotten used to it.
The other thing that annoys me, Jack, along these lines is I don't get to pick what app I use for my text messages.
After years of using what is now bundled into Signal, Text Secure, and Text Secure and Red Phone, and eventually bundled. It's like, I have, like, instead of almost everyone I know being by default Signal, you can't change the default, and it's like 3 people that I know that are on Signal that we communicate via Signal, because it's a pain in the ass as opposed to Android, where it's just like, hey, they're on Signal too. Here you go.
Right. Or they're not, and you still get your text messages in Signal on Android.
Right. You still get it in Signal.
Yeah.
And from Android, you can, if you're willing to decrypt, you can actually move things from, your old Android to your new Android. And
Yeah. Yes. You can do that stuff.
You can do that stuff.
I thought it was interesting, though, how the whole dichotomy of the jailbreaking thing is basically gone away. Like, there's no real... there's actually more risk to jailbreaking your iPhone today than there is benefits in terms of functionality. I guess if you wanted to do things like swap out your text messaging app, but...
I won't get into it.
It's economics, right? The economics of time and personal value, as well as the money of what you can do with it. So
yeah, swapping SIM cards out too, I think, is another thing too.
Oh, you know what, Paul? I tried it, and I went back to Android for a month, and it was the worst experience ever. I am so locked into the Apple ecosystem. I am screwed. I know I'm screwed. My iMessages,
yes,
even though I did the right thing or whatever, people kept texting me, so I basically had no friends for a month. It was awesome.
My wife and I couldn't text for about a week when I switched from iOS to Android.
Yeah. So I'm back on iPhone now. I learned from my Apple overlords not to question their judgment.
Oh, once I switched and I got it all working, I just stayed on Android. I'm like, I'm not ever going back.
So my short little 2 cents, I really don't want to get into it too much, is when you jailbreak your iDevices in the past year, basically because the jailbreaks haven't been moving forward because of what you mentioned, a lot of the current software you're using, they keep moving forward, which is fine. But what ends up happening is they end up turning off services, and they don't support the older version of the apps. So what ends up happening is because the jailbreaks aren't coming out, the jailbroken apps you may have had or the previous apps you had are no longer supported. They don't run at all. So it's interesting because you're kind of forced to move forward and forced towards the upgrades, which are non-jailbroken.
Right.
So the ecosystem itself is kind of forced forward.
Yeah, Apple has, in the apps that are supported apps, have forced you to go non-jailbroken. And
a lot of apps are really specific about, if you're not running the last, basically 2 versions, we don't support you. They'll actually block all the web APIs.
Yep.
But
it's interesting. Jeff, you got some stories in there?
Yeah, I was going to say, how far into the show are we going to go before we talk about what might be kind of a big story this week?
Which one is that?
Petya? Not Petya.
Petya was a big story, but
not Petya. Well, I actually had the first story I have up here was actually, I had it up last week. We didn't get a chance to talk about it. It's a Wired article, and I was listening to the author being interviewed on NPR talking about this story, and basically he was saying that there's a theory that a lot of what's going on in terms of cyber attacks against the Ukraine, the theory is that they're using the Ukraine as sort of a test lab for probably a bigger target. And how well would the U.S. infrastructure hold up if a lot of the cyber attacks that they're seeing targeting the Ukraine, power grids and banks and things like that, how well would we hold up? And then this week comes along and there's this this ransomware that comes out that now a lot of experts are saying really isn't ransomware at all. It had a more nefarious purpose. So what are people's thoughts?
I will say something which it's on the record, but I heard from a friend of a friend of a friend that Mass General Hospital in Boston shut down an hour after the Eternal Blue got released because they knew they were going to get targeted. Hospitals in the U.S., amongst other infrastructures, are worried about these things happening.
Interesting.
Well, I won't speculate into who's a target and who's not. What I will say is I read a book a few months ago, Dark Territory. I think a lot of people should probably read Dark Territory. It's an interesting...
They should, especially chapter 4.
That's
the one you're in, right, Jeff?
Yep, that's the one I'm in.
Yeah. That's a great book. Now, what's interesting though is what a coincidence that in the last few years we've had this shadow brokers thing, we've had this this ongoing war in the Ukraine. Because the Ukraine thing that you were just talking about, Jeff, that's a cyber war that has bled or has been combined with a kinetic war of sorts, right? An actual war. It's been going on for 3 years, and then all at the same time, we've had these like ransomware-ish kind of things that if you talk to people, it's like, okay, this was never about money, right?
Right.
So, and we
Well,
won't get into the election or anything like that.
Well, we'll let other people weigh in. I have an opinion or two.
No, let's hear it, Jeff.
Well,
How are nukes work?
and this is sort of.
Thank God nobody can find 9.5-inch floppies.
Floppy, yeah.
Jeff knows what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I used to. Well, never mind. This is sort of an indictment of the whole industry, and we're lamenting about whether people should use Windows or not. But for most of at least my experience in the commercial side of the world, the last 20 years or so, in terms of InfoSec cybersecurity, we've sort of avoided this 800-pound gorilla for most of the customers that I've ever had, which is, what do you do if somebody wants to come after you as an organization in particular? Because most of the attacks that have happened, in the early years, it was just people just sort of joyriding and, can we deface a website? And then somebody figured out, isn't DOSing people fun? And of course it, caused lots of damage, but it was not a big deal. And then people started figuring out how to steal credit cards, and they did that for a while. And slowly and gradually there's a monetization happening. But what happens when, and I think this is where it starts to get a little bit scary, and we're seeing it in the Ukraine, where warfare happens, and warfare happens in the cyber, and companies are actually targeted, not simply, the bad guys are trolling to see who's vulnerable to the latest, ODA that's out there, or the latest ransomware that they've come up with, and they're just kind of trolling whoever hits it.
So
companies in general are woefully unprepared for serious cyber attack, I guess.
So Jeff, do you want to tell them where the 9.5-inch floppies get used? Go on, tell them.
Well, if you want to talk about, there was an article that Paul had about, hacking the nukes. And I don't think that's an issue because the authentication codes are on 9.5-inch floppies still.
Well, it's interesting, right? They had in that article a couple of things that I thought was interesting that we're publicly talking about, right? So they had this malware that they used on the nuclear or the power grid in the Ukraine that was modular, right? And if you dig into it, it's modular from what a power plant protocol you would want to attack, right? So you don't build a one-off modular framework, right, for just the Ukraine. It doesn't make any sense, right? So it's interesting. The question is, I guess my question around that is, why would we or anybody publicly know about this modular framework, right? If you're really sophisticated, that modular framework goes untalked about or undiscovered, right? Kind of like Stuxnet was undiscovered for as long as it was.
Yeah, you don't have very many Siemens engineering, cyclotrons engineers. There's only a couple hundred, I guess, in the world.
The centrifuges,
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, just to be pedantic, they're 8-inch floppies, not 9.5s.
Sorry.
9.5.
Well, Apollo tells him it's 9.5.
Oh,
it feels half to me.
I was hoping somebody would go there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Jack.
I love that the 9.5-inch floppy is the title for this episode. For sure. For
Wonderful.
sure.
They're massive.
Oh, man.
Well,
I was trying to do that. I'm like, 5.25 times 2 is 9.5. I'm like, well, they're really 9.5. And then I'm like, if they're like nuclear launch codes, like what happens if you touch the part you're not supposed to touch that looks like a pill in the middle? Are the launch codes like invalid at that point? Like, what if someone's like, oh my God, I touched it by accident?
Just jam that into Whopper and off we go.
Do you want to play a game?
Something in there about
Do you want to play a game?
someone touched the 9.5-inch floppy and it still doesn't work. Something.
The Whopper?
Something.
What? No.
That's going to be a new game now. 9.5-inch floppy. Moving on.
Oh my God.
Moving on.
Moving on from that, please. Please let's move on from that.
I saw a headline, and I couldn't find it, but I saw a headline yesterday or the day before. I thought there was some suspicion that some of the U.S. nuclear power plants were experiencing some difficulties, and I didn't get a chance to delve into it. Did anybody else see anything like that?
I saw the same stories. I haven't read much into it.
Yeah.
I
It's
saw
hard
some
to
of the headlines. Scratch that. Mine were the hacking nuclear submarines.
Yeah, so it's really funny too.
Oh, System D. Let's talk about that.
Well, now nuclear submarines. Go back to that really quickly. What's really funny.
We're
I know
running short
for
on time, though. We have to cover System D, though.
hold on a sec. The British Navy uses Windows XP for their submarines. All right.
And also,
According to
their
that
new
article we
aircraft
first
carrier.
talked about, they should use DOS because DOS still runs BBSs today and hasn't been hacked, according to that author that is from SUSE. Anyway, System D, DNS response, code
Yeah.
execution.
Oh, God.
So Qualys stack busting.
Well, that was first. Qual stack busting was first, right?
Well, it's the same problem.
It's the same problem,
problem.
just different attack vector.
Yeah, different context. Yep.
System D is the attack vector, which Apollo and I were kind of laughing hysterically when we were talking about this because we're like, Docker's completely secure from this because it doesn't support System D. And those of you that work with Docker and are like, why doesn't System D? Oh, I see. Supervisor D. Got it. It. Anyway, so if you're not running Docker and you're using System D, which is every other Linux flavor on the planet,
Yep. Though you could argue too, the hypervisor needs to run System D.
the hypervisor probably
yeah,
does
yeah,
run
yeah,
System
yeah.
D. Yes, I agree.
So System D makes me almost as mad as that story that I saw today about Ubuntu putting ads in the message of the day on servers now or workstations.
Oh, God.
So you've got Ubuntu reaching out for message of the day, right? And then you have System D that can reach out to anywhere to do DNS queries. I mean, it's all screwed up. I don't even know what to say.
It's not ads. It's a value add.
It's a value
It's a
add.
value add.
But why? So, but this attack vector theoretically would only work when the system boots, and System D would reach out over DNS.
Right.
Or you restart a service,
Restart a service. Yep.
Yep.
or you shut down your computer. I mean, this is like saying, hey guys, it's not a problem. Microsoft services, right, can reach out and do DNS requests to on the network to launch services. We would be just going crazy over that kind of a bug, right? This is crazy.
When are we going to reach the only logical conclusion, which is not to play the game?
Yeah, that's like
Let's
we only run
unplug
DOS.
everything.
We run DOS on BBSs, right?
No, we run Multics.
We run Multics.
We run Multics.
It comes back to Multics
All for days. Yep.
on 9.5-inch floppies.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to pen and paper.
That's 9.5 inches.
So the game, Apollo, do you play it like Flappy Bird? Like, how do you play this 9.5-inch floppy disk?
It just looks 9.5 inches. That's what my girlfriend tells me. At least.
It's only 3.5, but it looks 9.5.
Yeah, this is going to get worse the longer this goes on.
It is.
Yep.
Next story.
So, next story.
The thing about
Is there
3.5
any
inches is
good
it wasn't
news?
floppy. Not necessarily good news, but on a closing note, separating the paranoid from the hacked apparently is difficult. I thought this was funny. This came from Bruce Schneier, who republished a story. It said basically this person had been hacked. They were doing all these nefarious things. And the person says that nobody believed me. My wife and my brother thought I had lost my mind. They scheduled an appointment with a psychiatrist. And he talks about the struggles of differentiating between someone who's just misinformed or overly paranoid and thinks they've been hacked versus the people who are actually hacked and being specifically targeted, like the horrible movie Hacked or whatever with Pierce Brosnan. I don't know if you saw that. It was pretty terrible.
Well, the litmus test is whether they have the tinfoil hat on or not.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yes, you can certainly weed those people out. But I just liken it to my dream about Jim Carrey. My nightmare.
That's
my
why
nightmare. That's why I added the story was my nightmare about Jim Carrey hacking my Facebook account. Clearly, I fall in the paranoid category for this particular hacking my Facebook account.
You know, Paul, Jim Carrey's been out of the zeitgeist for how long now? I haven't even said the name in like 10 years.
He's not
sure.
out. He's waiting.
You wonder why. He actually was in the news lately. Apparently, he's being sued for the death of his, what was it? Someone who pays attention to the news more than I do.
Oh, no.
His girlfriend? He's being sued by his girlfriend?
Oh, my God.
The death of his girlfriend. So Jim Carrey abandons effort to make mother of his late Irish girlfriend pay $372,000 bond in suicide case. So his girlfriend committed suicide, apparently. So he has been in the news lately, although I hadn't read that news until I didn't realize that was news until I had the dream about Jim Carrey hacking my Facebook account.
And then you decided to go look up Jim Carrey because
then I did, and I think it was Riley that told me that was like, no, he's been in the news lately. I'm like, really? Because he was in my nightmare. That's how I.
So Paul, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Tell me what it was like when you was a baby.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It dropped on my head or something.
And it's time to move the show over to the couch, and you need to lie down.
That's right. That's right. Tell me about your childhood, apparently.
Is this session making you uncomfortable, Paul?
Yes, it's making me very uncomfortable.
Sometimes a 9-inch floppy is just a floppy.
Only when it's an 8-inch floppy.
The 3.5 inches were stiffer.
We even got Jack shaking his head.
Jack has lost it. Jack has officially lost.
There's nobody left listening now. We should.
No, we haven't brought up the zip drive. Come on.
No, the jazz drive.
The jazz drive.
The jazz drive is even better.
Jazz drive.
The super disc.
Yeah.
I've got like a dozen jazz drives right behind me. I have no way of reading them. But I've got them.
Oh, we're gonna.
Has anybody got a spare SCSI port?
Apparently, Apollo has a 9.5-inch floppy in his office. Oh, all right. With that's it. I'm calling it. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Jack gave us the official over and out. We'll see you next time on Paul Security Weekly.